seem to have a little problem here. Hey everyone, can you hear me? Just making sure that this is working. Okay, great. Hi everyone, I'm Bill Graham. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks for coming and hanging out. So today marks 6 months since I started making videos, and I thought I would mark the occasion by doing a live stream, taking some questions. All right, great. Seems to be working. Excuse me. So, anybody got any questions? If not, maybe I'll start by just playing a little bit of piano. Let me switch over to my top camera. And maybe I'll play Embraceable You. Well, that's aggravating. Hold on, let me turn my ringer off. I'm starting to play a little 6 diminished thing on that 2 chord. I was going to play this song in the key of F, and so I was starting on a C. I was going to run on this G minor 7. I was going to run B flat 6 diminished in contrary motion from this C, and watch what happens when we play that. Excuse me, I think I messed that up. Then I was going to go into minor 6th on the flat 2 into the 1. This is a great song for playing 6 diminished on. All right. So, I just want to thank everyone for watching my channel. It's been so great to be able to teach these concepts to such a receptive audience. And I've got a couple of questions here that I thought I'd go on ahead and answer. Let me pull them up. Just a second here. Okay, right. So somebody wanted to know about what do you do on tunes that use more 3 chords and 6 chords and don't use as many dominants. So this is actually really easy. There are only 2 sets of rules, really. There's the major rules or the minor rules, and then there are dominant rules. So what you can think is on the 1 chord, use those tonic rules, but use those same rules on the 3 chord and on the 6 chord. And then use our dominant half-step rules on the 5 chord, but also on the 7 chord and on the 2 chord and even on the 4 chord. So let's take a quick look at how that would work. So let's say, excuse me. Let's say that we're in the key of C, and you're on an E minor 7 chord. Let's set up that we've been in the key of C. And so this 3 chord is really a 1 chord with 2 diminished notes, right? So this E minor 7 is really just C6, but with 2 notes borrowed from B diminished, if we're thinking like in 6 diminished, right? And of course the 6 chord is just the 1 chord, C6, but with the 6th in the bass. So whether we're on the 1 chord or on the 6 chord or on the 3 chord, you're going to use those same rules. So, and then when we're on the 2, 4, 5, or 7 chord, same thing. So if we're on G7, right, we're going to use our G7 rules. Right? But let's use those same rules, of course, on B minor 7 flat 5. Or on D minor 7. Or on F major 7. So does that clear that up a little bit? Hey Mark, how's it going? Let's see, I think I had another one here. Okay, addressing our descending lines on major 7 chords. I do want to make a little correction to what I said in my tonic video. All right, so I said that one of the rules that we can play coming from the 7th is to put a half step after the 6th. And that is what Barry teaches, but I left out an important distinction, which is that you wait to do that until the 2nd octave. So if we started on the 7th, we're really going to put no half steps for the 1st octave, and then once we reset our rule in the next measure on the next downbeat, that's when we're going to start adding a half step, thinking like starting from the 6th at that point. Right, because if we're coming down 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and now we're on our next downbeat, so we're going to use our rule from the 6th. right? Hey, Bennett, how's it going? So, I think that answers that question, hopefully. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about anything? No? No questions? All right. Well, that's okay. Oh, okay. Building a diminished line on the flat 2 or the flat 3. Okay, so building a diminished line on the flat 2 or the flat 3. Let's talk about, I think what you're asking is that really there are 3 diminished chords that we need to be able to deal with. Right, so if we're in the key of C, right, there's going to be B diminished is the diminished that's built in, right? It's just the diminished that's on the 7. C diminished is our common tone diminished. And so that's just a modification of the 1 chord. And we can play that, we're always going to treat that as a common tone diminished or a tonic diminished sound, whether it's the 1 in the bass, or the flat 3, or the sharp 4, or flat 5, or even the 6. That's all the C diminished. And then the C sharp diminished. So that C diminished leads back to C, right? Or if you've got the flat 3rd in the bass, it could lead up to the 3 chord sometimes. Or it could lead back to the 1 chord in first inversion. Or it leads down to the 2. And that happens in about 1 million tunes. It happens in Embraceable You. It happens in The Song Is You. So many songs I can't even think of. And then, of course, also in the blues, right, we've got the sharp 4 diminished leading into the 1 with the 5th in the bass. Okay, so that's what we do with that tonic diminished. All right, and then the only other diminished there is, the C sharp diminished, is related to the 2 chord. Right, so just think about where the diminished is leading you, and that ought to tell you what that's about. Okay, Tom, can you explain the down to the 3rd of the scale concept? I guess it's supposed to imply a diminished built on the 3rd of the dominant. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, like, if we're saying C7 down to the 3rd of A, right, we're just catching the 3rd of that A7 chord. And very often, yeah, we're going to come up a diminished. Something like that. Right, so if we're coming down C7 to the 3rd of A, and then up a diminished, and then that's going to resolve to D minor. Right, or probably want to make that a tonic minor at that point. And so instead of C7 to A7, that could have been E half diminished to A7 in the left hand. And of course, we know that E half diminished is really just C7. I hope that makes sense. How do you practice and absorb these concepts to the point of effortlessness? Man, just practice them a lot. Really get those rules to the point where you can say them, and to the point where you can hear them and sing them. That's how you really get these sounds in your head. You know, so knowing the rules is step one, being able to say, all right, on a dominant chord, if you're starting on the 1, we're going to put a half step between the 1 and the 7, right? If you start on the 3rd, we're going to put a half step between the 1 and the 7. If you start on the 5th or the 7th, same thing, 1 between the 1 and the 7, or 3 half steps, 3 and 2, 2 and 1, and 1 and 7, right? Etc. Just knowing those rules. On a major chord, we're going to put that first half step between the 6 and the 5. So intellectually being able to describe them is step one. And then, of course, coming over to the piano, practicing them, saying, all right, we're on C7, let's put a half step between the 1 and the 7. And just work on them, and immediately try and work on them in tunes that you're playing. So whatever tune you're working on, I remember the first tune that I started applying them to when I first heard about Barry's concept. I saw a video of Barry explaining the half-step rules, and another one of him explaining the family of 4 dominants concept. And I immediately sat down and started playing Spain by Chick Corea, right, which you would think is maybe a little bit of a modern tune, but this is actually something I've been meaning to address in a video, is how much Chick Corea comes out of bebop. His favorite piano player is Bud Powell, and his harmony, even though he uses some more extended harmony and some modal sounds, he really has a lot of traditional sounds in his playing. So I sat down and I started playing on Spain, and I was thinking, all right, so when we got to this F sharp 7 flat 9, I was thinking out of the family, all right, what if we played on C7 over that? And then resolving into the E minor, and then just playing our straight A7 over that. Now we're on C sharp half diminished, or really it's C sharp 7, and so I'm going to play another one of the family on it. What if we played E7? And then into F sharp 7, I thought maybe what if we played C7 on that? Right, and so immediately I was starting to hear these sounds that Chick was playing, and that every piano player that I liked basically was playing. Not just piano players, every horn player I liked was playing these sounds. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling now, but I hope that makes sense. Just start immediately applying the rules to tunes that you're working on, or tunes that you already know and tunes that you've played for years and years. Okay, how do you go about incorporating augmented lines into your playing? Well, so you got to think about what an augmented chord is doing, right? It's not just, a lot of us learn an augmented chord and kind of think, all right, well, that means a whole tone scale, right? That's okay, right? But really, the point of an augmented chord is voice leading, right? So the point of an augmented chord is to be generally to be a 5 chord that's leading into a 1 chord. And of course, we're talking here in functional harmony, right? In tunes like Great American Songbook kind of tunes that have functional directional chord progressions. And I'm not knocking on other kind of harmony because I love non-functional harmony also. It's just that right now we're talking about playing on functional harmony. So if we had a C augmented chord, for example, that's going to lead back into an F generally, or an F minor maybe. But let's say it's going to be just an F major for right now. So you got to think about the voice leading, right? So it's not just about like playing some kind of disconnected augmented sound. It's about hearing the augmented note that sharp 5 directionally leading into the third of the next chord. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so 16th triplets. Let's talk about what we play on 16th triplets. So, generally, we can put the half-step rule of the note we started on, right? As opposed to eighth note triplets, where we use the rule for the alternate note. Let's start on the third, maybe. So we use the rule for the F when we started on the E. As opposed to using the rule for the E when we use 16th note triplets. Excuse me. It's hard to fit them all in there, right? So, anyway, it's a little bit on 16th triplets. That's okay, Jana, get on the train. My little sister lives in Brooklyn, and she's a gigging drummer. Probably on her way to a gig. Let's see here. Can I talk a little bit about borrowing? Yeah, sure. So, borrowed notes, it's almost ludicrously simple, right? It's just that you think about whatever chord you're on, and you just borrow a note from the other chord, right? So when we're thinking about 6 diminished, there's really just two chords that we're thinking about, right? There's the 6th chord, or there's the diminished. So when you're on the 6th, let's borrow one note from the diminished. And that gives us a movement instead of a static harmony. And we could do it with 2 notes, or 3 notes, or all 4 notes is just moving the whole chord. And so that's being on the 6th chord and borrowing from the diminished. And then we can do the same thing on the diminished. We can borrow from the 6th. All right, so if we're on B diminished, we're going to borrow a note from C 6th, or 2 notes from C 6th, or 3 notes from C 6th. Or again, play the whole C6 chord, and then back to the diminished, right? And so classical composers knew about this, right? They knew about this borrowed sound, because let's listen to this sound. Let's put the tonic in the bass, and we're going to put the diminished over top of it, resolving to the tonic, right? Or you'll sometimes get this sound too, right, of just having the G7 over the C. And some people, like, ludicrously want to call this C major 7 sus 4, and it's silly, right? It's not every vertical sonority has to have a name like that. You can see in the movement that this is a dominant moving to tonic, and the bass just hasn't gotten there yet. The bass is already on the tonic before the harmony arrives. So I hope that helps on the idea about borrowed notes. Okay. When you play tunes with major 7 in the chart, or implied by the melody, so like the beginning of Just Friends, how it starts with the major 7th of the chord in the melody. So how am I thinking about that? Yeah, as far as the line goes, I'm just thinking about the major scale that it's coming from. But as far as comping is concerned, so if we had this C major 7 chord to deal with, yeah, I would see that as being a 6th on the 5th, right? So being G 6th over that C, moving through, at least that's one of our options, the 6th on the 5th with that 6th diminished scale, and of course that can lead back to the regular C6 diminished. And in this case, this is the 4 chord, right? It's not really the tonic, so it's going to move on. And then we're going to do the same thing when we get to the real tonic, play the 6th on the 5th to the 6th on the 1. And so we could, again, play the whole, in this case, D6 diminished scale against the G, or we could just play a D6th into G6. Let's do it with just a couple of borrowed notes on top. Leave these two, but we're going to play. That's another thing I forgot to mention in borrowed notes, is a lot of the time we're going to borrow from below. Listen to that beautiful crunch you get right here. We would never think to play this chord. All right. Could I talk a little bit about the flat 2 over C7? Okay, so that, I think you're talking about playing the minor 6th on the flat 2, right? So this is what the rest of the world, like the non-Barry world, would probably call a dominant 7, flat 9, flat 13, or maybe dominant 7, flat 9, sharp 5. But we don't really need to think about it that way. Also, the rest of the world would probably think about this as an altered scale, right? So they would call this a C altered scale, right? And play D flat melodic minor starting from C. Right, but when you just kind of play it as the scale like that, you're missing a lot of the character. Not that that's the worst thing in the world or anything, but when we... That to me just sounds a lot more idiomatic, right, than just endlessly running up and down a scale. It's fine, but... Again, that's just a more idiomatic sound to me, or a sound that I like more. Yeah, okay. All right, let's see. Have I missed any questions in here? All right. Let me switch back over to the main camera here. All right. I guess if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to just one more time say thank you guys so much for watching my channel. It's been so great to be able to talk about these concepts with an audience that's interested. It's just so cool. I never, ever would have thought that there are this many people that want to talk about bebop. It's just so cool. Although, by the way, I do like other music than just bebop. I love bebop, of course, and I'm happy to teach it and talk about it all day long. But I am going to be talking about some other music on the channel coming up soon. I'm going to be putting some of my original compositions up here, too, so I hope that some of you will be interested in some of that, and if not, that's no big deal. But one more time, just thank you all so much for watching and for continuing to watch. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.